Hello, today I'm going to do a review of an album that I came across recently, and it is Major Parkinson's Valesa Chapter One Velvet Prison. This was released near the start of October in the year 2022. The reason I'm doing this review is because I think this is an absolutely stunning piece of work, and one that hasn't received much attention. Major Parkinson are a very strange band. How I found them was through Spotify's similar artists feature. So I was listening a lot to a fellow Norwegian band called 22, just the number 22. By the way, good band. Check out the You Are Creating album. Fantastic collection of songs. But I was listening to a lot of them, and I'd found them through the same process. But I looked at similar artists, and one of those listed there, probably just for the fact that they're also Norwegian, was Major Parkinson. Now, I did this at the start of October. So I found Major Parkinson pretty much as soon as this album came out. So when I became a fan, that had just been released. Which probably helped, really, because Major Parkinson fans they're a bit more split on this one as they are to the other LPs. Major Parkinson are a very strange band, and fans will compare them to a band called Cardiacs, who are equally strange. They're described as avant-garde rock, which I can see why they'd call it that. It's not really avant-garde, but it's just really wacky, off the wall, and to the point where it sounds sinister, sort of. And if you listen to the first three Major Parkinson LPs, you really get that feel. The fourth one, the one prior to this one, Valesa, it's called Black Box, and it feels a bit more in the direction of this album. It's a little less strange. It's very dark and very complicated, but it has less of the... put it this way. They're in, like, circus music compilations, like music that killer clowns would listen to. That sort of thing. And I get that comparison, and that's what people say about it. Or a bunch of violent sailors, you know, with a freaking carton of ale, just having a rough night. Yeah, Major Parkinson are a very strange band, but they do have some ingredients that I really like. And in a lot of ways, they remind me, especially from Twilight Cinema onwards, they have a very Marillion thing going on. Part of the reason I found this band, actually, was because of the disappointment I had with Marillion's 2022 album, which was An Hour Before It's Dark, which, considering Marillion were my absolute favourite band up to that point, that was such a disappointment that it actually drove me to look for new music. So thank you to Marillion for producing an album so bad that actually made me find new good music. Hence where Major Parkinson comes in. And this is very much like a Marillion album. If you listen to it on the surface, it doesn't really feel like that, but it is quite similar in a lot of ways. And as I think about this album, Valesa Chapter One, it almost feels to me like it's Major Parkinson's misplaced childhood. It's got a strangely similar feel to it. Not only because it's essentially one long piece of music, a conceptual piece, but there's just something about it that has a similar tone and a similar energy. Granted, it's a lot longer, and one of the things that I don't like much about Marillion's Misplaced Childhood is the fact that it's so short that it just feels like it comes and goes. Whereas this one, it's longer, it feels longer, but it also feels justified in that length. So let's get into the nitty-gritty of the album rather than the background of me, whatever. I will also say, disclaimer, this is my favourite album of 2022. So not only have you had Marillion's An Hour Before It's Dark, which was a bit of disappointment, you also had the Deer Hunter releasing Anti-My, which was... I'm not sure whether I really like it or I'm mostly indifferent to it, which is strange for a Deer Hunter album. But again, that paved the way for me finding new artists. Don't get me wrong, Anti-My it's a really good album, especially technically, but I think it's a little too polished. It's just a little bit too perfect. which sort of loses me a bit in terms of charm. But that's a completely different review. Major Parkinson's Valesa, to me, is the greatest album of 2022. A lot of the fans will disagree, and I went on this tangent before. No, forgive me, this is all ad lib. It's tangent central over here. A lot of Major Parkinson fans think that it's too different, and I can see that because it brings a lot of synth pop, which is strange when you think of a progressive rock album. There's a lot of synth pop in here, like 80s. Think of 80s synth pop in your head. Play it in your head, and you'll be thinking of something quite similar to this album, which is very, very strange. And it's understandable that a lot of Major Parkinson fans have come into this thinking, oh, this is a bit too much. But coming into it as a guy who had never heard Major Parkinson, and this was basically the first Major Parkinson, sorry about that, the first Major Parkinson release I've really come across. Obviously, I'm going to come at it a bit differently, and I'm exploring Major Parkinson's early work after this one. But that's besides the point. Let's discuss the album. What is Valesa? I don't know. I don't know. And one of the great things about this album, I think, is that it takes a lot of exploring. I've listened to it countless times since I got it. This is the digipack, by the way. It's also got, there's also an LP, so there's your album. Funky little design. I've had listened to it loads of times, and I dig into the lyrics as much as my brain will allow me while listening to the music. And it's obvious that there's a lot of interconnecting stuff. There's themes, there's characters, and there's a story flowing through there somewhere. But it takes a lot of my brain to start piecing the bits of this puzzle together. Now, I like that sort of stuff. If you know much about me from in this regard, you know that I like stuff that you have to delve into, that you have to really think about to understand what's truly going on. I'm not so much into the surface level stuff like you get in your typical pop songs, or you get in, for instance, Marillion's latest album, which is just punch you in the nose with its message. There's no question what they're trying to tell you. This is much better, in my opinion, because it doesn't lead you along. It gives you you're like a sniffer dog, and they give you a scent, and you're left to explore an airport for the drugs. And is it under there? Is it under there? Might be under. I think I smell some under there, which might mean it's over there. Yeah, I like that. There's more to it. It's more of a challenge, but I really like that. The concept, I believe, it revolves around a central character. There's also a second character called Jonah, who has died. I don't know when Jonah has died, because I think a lot of this is the protagonist looking back through snippets of his own life through like VHS and cassette tapes. Because as you go through this album, through its 17 tracks, you get loads of little sound effects and snippets, and I think they're beautifully done, by the way. Absolutely stunning work in terms of how they've used these sound effects. You've got the sound effects of like cassette players having cassettes put in and closed, and the play button pressed. The sounds of a live audience coming in, just swooping in out of nowhere. You got the sounds of the protagonist entering vehicles, leaving vehicles, stepping outside of a building as the music's still going in the background. It's a beautiful use of all these different sound effects, and I think that's all part of the story going forward. There are some weird sound effects in there, such as on the track Intermezzo. I think it might be Italian, not sure. I don't speak Italian. But there's that track in the middle of the album, just before the break, because it's basically split into two parts, with Jonah being the part in the middle that basically joins it all. But it's just before that one where there's the song about Jonah's death, or what I think is about Jonah's death, and it plays a lot of, I think it's like Formula One commentary in Italian, I think. There's this little groove playing along, and then you just get the snippets. You can hear the cars zooming here and there, and the commentator goes in the background. And it's strange. But there's obviously a reason for it being there. Why it's there, I don't know, needs more thinking. But I do believe it might have something to do with more references given throughout the rest of the album. So, for the song Velvet Moon, which comes after Jonah, so just 2 after that, he enters, at the start of the song, the piece more like, he enters this vehicle, closes the door, and you can imagine that the driver of this taxi cab is called Dave, because you get the line, "Dave, is that your name?" And he drives to the Velvet Moon, where we then spring into the song Iron and Margarita. This might all sound confusing if you haven't heard this album, by the way, so I recommend you go listen to this absolute masterpiece, because, yeah, this part of the video is going to be a bit more in depth, and you have to be in the know, really. But there's also a lot of stuff, was it Sadlands, where there are references to a windshield full of frost and broken tyres. And there's a few references to light bulbs in the rain, which, for whatever reason in my head, probably because of the context of everything else, I see, because he's telling Dave, the taxi cab man, count the light bulbs in the rain. That must be headlights. Count the headlights. And there's all these little mini references. There's also that F1 bit. I believe part of this is a car accident. Something that happened in this story, whether it happened to Jonah, maybe he was killed in a car accident. That might be why. Again, I don't know. I'm just finding these clues and trying to piece them together, which I love doing. What other things have we got going on in here? We've got the first track is Goodbye Blue Monday, which is an odd piece. It's just an atmospheric piece to bring you into the album. It's very strange. But we truly start the album with Behind the Next Door, which is almost the protagonist at a stage where he's looking to progress to the next part of his life. And I think a lot of the stuff that follows this track are memories that precede the protagonist at this point. And he's looking at all these memories through this guy who's singing this song or narrating this song Behind the Next Door is the guy who's sitting there with a cassette tape player thing, and he's looking for all his memories. He's looking at memories of this Jonah character, this character that he meets in the song Saturday Night. It is so... I want people, if you're a major Parkinson fan and you have an idea of what's going on, please do help me. Not that I'm not enjoying trying to figure out myself. What are the highlights of this album for me? Behind the Next Door, Saturday Night, Live Forever, Sadlands, Velvet Moon, all the way through to The Room. I think that those are the best tracks on the album. The weakest? Probably Lemon Symphony, which is one of the joining tracks. That's another thing a lot of people seem to complain about, is these joining tracks. So you've got Ride in the Whirlwind, Intermezzo, Posh Apocalypse, Lemon Symphony, and they're largely instrumentals. But I think they work. I like how they break up the album. I've got no complaints about them. Probably the weakest track actually for me is Heroes. I get to Fantasia Me Now, and then I usually just end the album. And the theme going on in Heroes is a bit strange. But we have to remember that this is Valesa Chapter One. The band have already said that they've written Chapter 2. So I think the song Heroes will become more relevant as we bounce into the next one. And I'm not sure, I could be completely wrong. It could be a completely different theme, could be different characters, could be a whole different story. Or it could be more on this protagonist and his things going on. There's a few strange lines in there. Show me the killer. Who's the killer? What's this killer we're talking about? Is it something to do with Jonah? I don't know. Is it the protagonist? Is he the killer? I think we'll find more clues in Chapter 2, and I'm so looking forward to that. The band are trying to raise money to make it, so I'm hoping at some point to buy the the big vinyl version of this, and probably a couple of little bits just to help them along, because I think it's fantastic. And this band is not well known enough. It is fantastic. The musicianship and the production on this piece of art is a piece of art. It's glorious. If you haven't heard this album already, give it a go. Really, give it a go. I did want to mention my absolute highlight on this whole record. This one single bit that sticks out to me. And it comes in quite a surprising track, really. It comes in Sadlands, which is one of those connecting bits, but it's a piano and vocal led bit. So it is sort of a mini song. There's a live audience that pops in occasionally. So we get the live audience in Behind the Next Door, Live Forever, and yeah, Sadlands. So those 3 tracks in the first half of the album, we have this live audience that just comes in as if we're at a live show. And it happens again with Sadlands. So throughout this piano-led piece, which is a very somber piece, there's this weird juxtaposition where the crowd is going wild, whistling and cheering and giving it all that, oh, hey, we're enjoying ourselves. While John Iver, he's Norwegian, his name's John, the lead singer. Well, John, probably playing as this character, this protagonist, in some form of memory, is singing this really somber song, really somber piece, and the crowd's just going mental in the background, hey! And that's a really weird juxtaposition. But then, the best part of it for me, as we hit the last line of Sadlands, Carry Me Home. Just before he sings that bit, you can still hear the crowd going. You can hear the whistle of a crowd member giving it all that and cheering. You can hear that. But then, as he sings Carry Me Home and hits that last piano note, you get a deserted hall. It's like the crowd has just gone purely silent. So from, hey, we're giving it all that and having a great time, suddenly as the song hits, the entire audience just stops. Either they disappear to an empty hallway or they all just fall silent. Because you can still hear like little bangs and creaks of this hall. The slight movements in this hall, but the voices, the cheering has all stopped. And whatever that means, I just, the chills that it gives me. And sorry, that's my cats fighting beneath the thing. Whatever that means in the context of the song, I don't particularly know. I have my suspicions, but whatever the case, it gives me chills how that audience just stops suddenly at the end of this song. It is beautiful, absolutely beautiful. I think this is Major Parkinson's masterpiece. And that's coming as someone who's only just found them and who was introduced to them through Valesa. So take of that what you will. I think you should check this album out. It is brilliant, absolutely stunning. I cannot stop listening to it. I'd never think I'd hear a synth pop concept album before. But my God, they make it work. Fantastic stuff. And I will be listening to a lot more Major Parkinson. I've already bought physical copies of Songs from a Solitary Home and Twilight Cinema. Eventually I'm going to get Black Box, I'm going to get some LPs. I'm considering myself a fan now. And this was the best song of 2022. I know it's taken me a while to get to this review, but I just couldn't stop listening to it. I wanted to listen to it more, and eventually I just thought, yeah, I need to do a review of this. it's great. So if you like that, please do like and share this video. Try to... I'm not doing this for me. Do it for Major Parkinson. It's sort of for me, because I want their Chapter 2 to come out. So the more people I can convince to get onto the Major Parkinson train and help fund the next album, the better, because then that brings me enjoyment. But also, something I do need to mention, while touring for this album, John, the lead singer, had a series of mini heart attacks and then a big heart attack while he was on stage that nearly took his life. He ended up in hospital. I did send a message to them over Facebook, but again here, all the best to John and the rest of the band, specifically John, of course. Get well soon. It's good to see that you're awake in hospital. You do some cracking work. If it takes you longer to recover, that's you. Don't worry. Do that. The music comes second. Your health comes first. But at the same time, I cannot wait for your next piece. I cannot wait. And but yeah, best of luck. Get well soon. I'm sure you'll come back absolutely firing. And someday I'm going to come see Major Parkinson live, and I'll drag my wife along with me. So thank you to the band for producing such wonderful music. That's the band, by the way. Just there. And thank you all for watching if you made it this far. Other bands that I'm listening to at the moment, I've mentioned them already, 22. I'm listening to a band called Fair to Midland, who are a fantastic band as well. Unfortunately, they broke up a few years ago, but still, go check out their music, Fair to Midland. And Dredge, who are also talking about doing a new album. So check that out as well. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope you've enjoyed this review. I shall see you next time. Ta-ra.